Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Agenda podcast on the Blood Red channel, courtesy of the Liverpool Echo, with myself, Patrick Smith. And once again, the story on everyone's lips is Liverpool's midfield situation. Well, joining me today is the Liverpool.com editor, Matt Addison. Matt, how's things?
Yeah, all good, mate. Looking forward to getting stuck in. There's not too many topics of discussion to go through at the moment, is there? But midfield is definitely one of them.
Yeah, definitely so. And I'm also joined by Blood Red's Ed K. Ed, how are we doing?
Yeah, not bad, mate. Like Matt says, ready to get stuck in again to the midfield discussion.
Yeah, well, the midfield has really been the talk of the summer. It's a question that's never going to go away, as it looks more like we're delving into a crisis situation, as called by some. And last night brought the terrible news that Thiago Alcantara, as expected, is once again set for an extended period on the sideline, this time for up to 6 weeks. Matt, this is another devastating, I'll use the word again, blow in the long line of injuries for the Spaniard. He's going to miss some big games, and we're left once again frustrated at, I suppose, his lack of availability, which is probably one of the most important abilities regarding a midfielder, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's first and foremost not a surprise. I don't think anyone was hugely shocked to see that he went off injured. We've seen that before. We've known that that's been a bit of a problem, really. And I don't know how Liverpool really solved that. He's obviously not the only one that's got that issue in terms of availability. And I mean, I'm reluctant to sort of go all in on they've got to sign someone. They've got to do that, because I have to say, before the Fulham game, I wasn't particularly convinced that that was the case. I don't think it's probably helped that on the day Thiago wasn't great and gets injured, but also Fabinho was atrocious. Jordan Henderson didn't play well either. I think if both of those two had played well and Thiago had got injured, then maybe we'd be looking at it a little bit differently. But it's very, very easy to go back to those Jurgen Klopp quotes in the summer of, he said, well, we've got 8, 9 midfielders. What more do you want, kind of thing? And I suppose there is, and there was an obvious answer to that. It's, yeah, okay, you've got those number of midfielders, but Tyler Morton has since gone out on loan to Blackburn. Naby Keita was ill. Thiago's now injured. Curtis Jones is now injured. There's a bit of a question mark, I think, over a number of those players. And everyone said at the time, it's not really hindsight. It's, yes, you've got 8 or 9, but have you really? Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain as well, not mentioned him. He's injured as well in the last year of his contract. I just think they've got 8 or 9, but they haven't really. And I think Jurgen Klopp knew that, and I think we knew that as well. Obviously, we know the reason that they're probably going to take that gamble is Jude Bellingham and all of the rest of it in terms of the kind of pieces lining up in terms of what they want to do long term. But short term, it's starting to look a little bit worrying, albeit Naby Keita now is back in training, I believe, and is back from illness. He's going to be another option. You've got Elliott, you've got Carvalho, but yeah, they are a little bit light. They're not quite in crisis mode just yet, but there may be one injury away, which is probably not the ideal position to be in one game into the season.
Yeah, we'll definitely move on to the bigger picture of the midfield and individual players. But Ed, I'm going to bring it back around to Thiago for you. I'd love to credit the person, but I can't remember who I saw it from. But Thiago's missed 53 of the 124 matches he could have featured in for Liverpool, which is just a crazy number. This is 9 more matches he's set to miss. Do you think Thiago's injury proneness will ultimately be the downfall of his Liverpool legacy?
I'm not sure about downfall of his Liverpool legacy. Look, I mean, I think we all knew when he signed we were buying a player who's, the wrong side of 30, and he's not going to be able to play every game. Obviously, missing 53 out of 124. It's not great, especially given the difference that you can see when he is playing in that midfield 3 and when he's on song. You look at that Community Shield performance. He was out of this world, and I like I say, it's performances like that make me think an injury record like this, it's not going to damage a Liverpool legacy, but it is probably going to hurt the squad this season. Like Matt said, we're in a position now where we are one midfield injury away from going into crisis mode, and we've played one game this season. The games are coming thick and fast. Yeah, we'll have the World Cup break to probably get him fit. Obviously, a few players aren't going to that, but it does just mean that, again, you're looking at that team thinking an injury here or there, and it's going to be another situation where we could end up going from fighting with City for the title to sort of scrapping it out with the likes of Spurs, Arsenal, Chelsea for top 4.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that everyone's really worried about, I think, isn't it? Matt, simple question for you, one sentence. Are we at a crisis point with the midfield now?
Not just yet, no, I don't think so. But like we said before, it's not too far away, which is not a great position to be in at this stage. I think you'd always have wanted one more. I think we probably said similar last summer. You want one more, and they maybe got away with it last season in terms of the injuries, and Naby Keita staying a little bit fitter than what he had done. You've got to hope that that's going to continue. Thiago as well was a lot better last season, but it's just a case really of trying to manage these players. I think what you want with Thiago, knowing that he can't play every single week, is maybe to save him for the bigger games and kind of manage him in that way. But then that's, it's not quite as simple as that, is it? You need somebody else who can do that sort of job to come in the other matches and be able to rest him and rotate him. And I think it's the same, to be honest, with Jordan Henderson. I think he's at a point now where he played, I think, 53, 54 times last season. I just don't think that he is physically able to do that. And obviously he can do it without necessarily getting injured, but he can't do it and play to the levels that we know that he can get to. So, yeah, I do think one more would have been a decent idea, but at the same time, I don't necessarily think that an injury would change things. I know Jurgen Klopp, before the Fulham game, didn't rule out completely the possibility of another signing. He did say if there was an injury or if something did change, then maybe their transfer stance could change. But I don't know, is Thiago being out for certainly the rest of this month, possibly a little bit longer, is that going to be enough to make them go, we've got to go and sign someone? I'm not sure it necessarily is, just because, to be honest, the sort of player that we're talking about Liverpool needing, it's going to cost you a lot of money. It's not a case anymore of that you can go out and spend 15, 20 million on a player and that will kind of be the right level. I think you are talking about a bigger investment than that. And for 6 weeks, are you going to spend £50 million on a player? I'm not necessarily sure that Liverpool are. So, yeah, I'm sure a lot of other clubs and a lot of fans would do something different, but I'm still not convinced that Liverpool will change the stance that they've had basically since they signed Calvin Ramsey and said that was it, we're finished, we're done. I'm still inclined to believe them at this stage.
I mean, Matt, I'll stay with you because you mentioned Naby Keita there, and we've got to remember Naby Keita is only ill. He's not injured, though there is a long injury list at Liverpool. Hopefully he'll recover from this illness pretty quickly. And I just think he can have a big impact coming back into the team, because obviously following that Fulham result, we do really need a reaction, particularly from the midfield, don't we? How would you rate Naby's season last year, and do you think he could be this player that we're perhaps forgetting about at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's forgetting about the quality. I think it's still the same with him. If he's fit, I think he'll effectively become that fourth choice, won't he? Thiago, Henderson, and Fabinho, I think, would be most people's first three, but then probably Naby Keita is the one after that, and that's how it was last season. He was fit. He still didn't start that many league games actually last season compared to the number of times that he was fit. So he's not necessarily first choice, but I think he's a good enough backup to come in and play. But he's got to be fit, or certainly not ill to be able to play in those games. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure he'll be back in training this week. He'll be fine for Crystal Palace, unless there is obviously an injury between now and then. But, yeah, you'd imagine that he would come into the team. You'd imagine Harvey Elliott's got a pretty good chance. I think he was one of those, after he'd finished falling over his own feet when he first came on, he managed to find his footing and do okay at the weekend. I think he'll be another one that comes into that midfield. And it was just such an uncharacteristic performance from those midfielders. Fabinho and Henderson obviously now are fit. I wouldn't imagine that Fabinho will play anywhere near that badly again this season. So one or two changes, Keita, Elliott, I think the two really that I'd look at. Suddenly that midfield can look a little bit different. So, yeah, it's not a crisis yet. Naby Keita can be an important player for Liverpool this season, but there is always going to be a little bit in the back of your mind of he's only, a game or a training session away from an injury. So it's not a perfect situation, but it could be okay.
I mean, Ed, as well, we've also got Curtis Jones, hopefully returning from injury relatively soon. We've also got Harvey Elliott, as Matt mentioned, Fabio Carvalho. Those three players look to be rotational ones, the ones that will be coming off the bench, because now obviously we've got the luxury of having 5 substitutes. Are we comfortable heading into the season if these lads are the replacement midfielders on the bench? Are you happy with those options, or would you rather see someone a bit stronger maybe to bring on at times in midfield?
Look, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't firmly in the camp now of I probably would like to see us go out and get another midfielder, but I'm aware that is the club aren't going to be pushed. They're very adamant on their transfer stance. That they want to wait for Bellingham. Clearly, as Matt says, if we went out and tried to get someone now, we're going to have to pay through the nose to get it, because everyone knows Thiago's injured and that's why we'd be buying him. I think Klopp's happy with, Elliott, Carvalho and Jones, and, Harvey Elliott in that midfield three, I do quite like. Obviously, Carvalho is something of an unknown quantity. I think it could be a big season for Curtis Jones if he does get involved through injury, things like that. I think he's got to have a good year, because he's sort of promised a lot, but he's never quite kicked on yet. And I think with, if we get a couple more injuries, if God forbid, like you say, Naby Keita gets injured, which could happen, and he has to come in and fill in. Maybe he wants Jones rather than Elliott or Carvalho, as he's a bit more experienced. I think it could be a really important season for him. So I think that'd be interesting to see. But I do quite like Harvey Elliott as part of that midfield three, sort of bringing the ball forward, a bit more attack minded. When it's Thiago, Fabinho, Henderson at times, other than Thiago's obviously passing is ridiculous, but you're looking for who's going to create that chance. And I think with Elliott and Carvalho and Jones, they sort of drive forward, looking to create a bit more. And I would definitely like to see a lot more of Fabio Carvalho this season, whether that be, across that front three, filling in, or in that midfield three. I think he looks a really exciting player. So I think, Klopp's happy with it clearly, and I think we're going to have to be happy with it for now.
I mean, I agree with you, Ed. I'd love to see more of Carvalho. I mean, what do you make of his position? Because obviously against Fulham, he came on in the front three and played out wide. Do you think he's a bit wasted there? Do you think he's much more effective playing for the middle, or do you think his chances are mainly going to come out wide in games like that?
So I'm not sure we've seen enough of him yet in a Liverpool shirt to know which is his best position. But personally, I think I'd prefer to see Harvey Elliott filling in that midfield three, and then maybe Carvalho across the front three. I do think he's looking at driving at his defenders a bit more. You looked at the connection that him and Núñez look to maybe have, him and Diaz. I think he looks a bit more comfortable linking up as part of the front three than maybe Elliott does, and Elliott looking a lot more comfortable sort of slotting into that midfield, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really difficult dilemma, and I think it's one that will progress as the season goes on. Hopefully, he gets a more established position. But let's move on to the more exciting stuff and talk about some transfers. It's what everyone wants to hear. Matt, I'm going to ask you one first. Do you think Liverpool need to sign a midfielder right now? And if so, who would you choose as the one signing?
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally...
Let's say Bellingham aside to make it interesting.
Yeah, Bellingham aside. I think ideally, obviously, you'd want Liverpool to get one more in. It's just really a case of what profile of player would that be. It's probably one that is a little bit more versatile. I think the links with Matheus Núñez probably make a little bit of sense. Obviously, there's the obvious sort of, he plays in Portugal, so Liverpool probably are quite aware of him type angle to go at. But I do think he is one that he's got that Champions League experience. He's played in that same league that we've seen a bit of success with players moving across. I think that would be one that I would probably look at. But I think the interesting move sort of this week that's been going on is PSG starting to be a little bit more sensible with their transfers. It looks like Fabian Ruiz is going to go there from Napoli, 26 years of age, £22 million last year of his contract. So that kind of seems to me like one that's probably doable in terms of the kind of age and the profile that he is. Whether he's quite quick enough and quite got the physical attributes to play in the Premier League, I'm not too sure. But from what I've seen of him, looks a decent player, and it does sound like a reasonable kind of price tag, which, yeah, Matheus Núñez, I think the release clause for him is about 51 million. There's been talk of various others. Nicola Barella is one that's been linked, but again, you're going to be spending a lot of money on that. I think if there is a deal to be done, say for a Ruiz or someone like that, in that kind of early 20 sort of million, that kind of would make a little bit of sense for me, because then obviously Jude Bellingham next summer, you're not kind of blowing away the budget this summer on someone that you don't particularly want. So that's probably what I would look at doing. But whether Liverpool do that, I'd be slightly surprised.
Yeah, Fabian Ruiz, certainly a very classy player on the ball. He was looking at PSG all summer, but now they've obviously gone for Renato Sanchez, so perhaps that leaves an opportunity to go in for him. But Ed, how about yourself? Is there anyone you'd like to see particularly brought in? I mean, Matt's mentioned Nico Barella there. Any other players you'd like to see us have a look at?
Yeah, I think Barella is the one that sort of caught my eye when I saw we were being linked with him. Obviously, we didn't get to see any of him in the Champions League when we faced him because he was suspended, wasn't he? But I think he is more in that sort of Liverpool mould of player. You know, he's aggressive, he's high pressing, and I think he would fit into that midfield three quite well. Whether they want to, like Matt says, you'd have to shell out a fair amount of money if you wanted to get Barella now. Whether they're willing to do that and then go again and spend big on Bellingham next summer, probably not. If Barella's not he's clearly not the man they had their heart set on. That is Bellingham next summer. But I do just think now with Thiago having gone down injured, it would be nice just to bring in someone else. Maybe not a Barella, like you say, if you can find a steal somewhere for 20, 25 million, wherever that be. But yeah, I think Barella was definitely the name that was sticking out to me when we were linked with him.
Yeah, I mean, Barella's got that tenacity, that he's short and stocky, rapid. You can just imagine him slotting straight into that Liverpool midfield. Matt, there's been an interesting development today, though, as Manchester United's pursuit of Frenkie de Jong looked to collapse. They're now interested in a Liverpool rumoured target, Adrien Rabiot. I just want to ask you about this situation because it's an almost comical one, really, isn't it, going from Frenkie de Jong to Adrien Rabiot? And also, is there any chance that Liverpool could maybe do a shock swoop for Frenkie?
Yeah, I mean, the Frenkie de Jong thing, to touch on that first, is absolutely bizarre. The fact that he clearly doesn't want to leave Barcelona. If he does want to go somewhere, it won't be Manchester United. That move just makes no sense to me. It's the opposite of what Liverpool do in terms of their transfers. In terms of what Liverpool do is check with the player that they actually want to go there first, and then work off that basis. It seems so obvious to do that when you think of, Virgil van Dijk. He's the obvious example of Liverpool spoke with him and asked him, and obviously in the end that deal was delayed 6 months, but at least you knew that he was 100% convinced on moving to Liverpool. So yeah, Frenkie de Jong at Manchester United, I just, even if it goes through, as brilliant a player as he is, I just don't see it necessarily working, because he clearly doesn't want to go there, and his preference is and has always been to stay at Barcelona, despite the sort of bizarre sort of stuff around his contract and all the rest of it, which it is in itself another completely bizarre story. But yeah, that for me would be the reason why I don't think, as good a player as he is, I don't think Liverpool should be looking to kind of capitalise and steal on that. I know there's a deal there to be done, obviously, if you can convince him to move, and I think it would be far easier to convince him to go to Liverpool rather than United at this moment. But the fact that he just doesn't particularly want to leave Barcelona suggests to me that you probably should stay clear of him. I think he's a fantastic player, but not quite sure that Liverpool should be going for him. And in terms of Adrien Rabiot, I mean, the links with Liverpool were just hilarious, to be honest. There's absolutely no chance that was ever going to be true. As much as he might fancy it, Liverpool definitely will not be interested. He's not a player that would fit into Liverpool. The speculation was that they'd send Naby Keita the other way in a swap deal. That was kind of what was being suggested in Italy about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I mean, even that doesn't make any sense, does it? Because if you're after another midfielder, swapping one midfielder for another, even that, the numbers just don't add up. So, yeah, I'd be very, very surprised if Frenkie de Jong was one that Liverpool looked at for those reasons. But Adrien Rabiot, yeah, absolutely zero chance of that happening.
Yeah, I don't think a swap deal's on the cards, and I think a deal for Adrien Rabiot is even less likely for Liverpool. But we'll leave it there, lads. Thank you both to Edward Kay and Matt Addison for joining me on this episode of The Agenda. I really enjoyed that one. And there's just over 3 weeks left of the transfer window, so who knows? Maybe Liverpool will break the bank and go for Jude Bellingham. That's a big thank you to all of you for watching and listening along at home as well. We'll be back with another episode of The Agenda soon.